For our first web part, let's discuss the simplest one. That's the pi gauge web part. As you can see, it's a simple gauge that shows us what the value of a single pi tag is. If you put your cursor over there and hover for a bit, you'll notice that it's going to show you a little tooltip that indicates what the current value is and the current timestamp. When we use this, we're going to be building this using a builder screen. There's a lot of options available. We can look at the format, the legend, we can change the zone and the scale. So those are the things that are available for within here. We're going to be using a builder screen in just a second to build one of these. Now, whenever we start talking about that builder screen, it's a good idea to mention that if you want to find more information about any of this, you can download the documentation for the RT web or the Pi web parts objects from the tech support website. So simply go to techsupport.osisoft.com. You'll notice there's an option on that website called Download Center, Supporting Files, and then, Download Center, Documentation, User Manuals. From that result, you can choose Pi web parts for the product drop-down and just look for the current version. And this is what we would be looking for. So go ahead and grab this manual if you're interested in more information about how to configure this. So let's go ahead and build one. First thing I'm going to do is delete this one from here. Let's just get rid of it. I'll first get into edit mode on this web part page. I did that from, all of these things are available from up here on this site actions. So site actions, edit page, and now I'm going to delete this web part from, or just delete it. Just want to warn you, there's a couple of ways that you can make this disappear. One way you can make it disappear is by clicking on this X, and as you can see with the toolbar tip, that's just going to close this. It's not going to remove it. Later on, you'll notice that there is still a web part called Pi gauge sitting around on this particular page. So no, instead of doing that, I'm going to choose edit and then delete. Yeah, so don't, and we're reminded we're going to permanently delete that web part. Yeah, so don't confuse this, which closes, with this, which deletes. But that's what I want in this case. I want to delete. Now, as we add this, you're going to notice we're going to have to do a tag search, or we're going to have to type the name of a tag. We'll do it either way. The tag search should be very familiar. It's the same one you've seen in our other clients. So I'll start by choosing the zone, and I'll put this, let's just put it in the right column. We've seen what it looks like in the left column. Let's put it in the right column. I think it's probably going to end up looking the same when we go into view mode. And I'll scroll down in this list of web parts and find the ones for Pi web parts. Here it is, Pi web parts. I'll go ahead and choose Pi gauge. You can add more than one at a time if you wanted to. You can't really see this, but I'm going to click on add, and that will go ahead and add that web part. Now the web part as it stands right now has no data because there's nothing associated with this. There's no Pi tag associated with it. Well, that's because there is no default Pi tag. We have to configure this. So go into the option here called Edit, and you're going to modify this shared web part. So here's our builder screen, and it's from this builder screen that we configure things like the name of the Pi tag that we're going to display. So for example, I would like to look at the value CDT158. I can type it in like that, or I can go out and do a tag search. So I'll go ahead and click on this. This tag search, it should be a familiar tag search. Now from this tag search, I can look through a couple of different things. I can look through our AF database, or I can look through the traditional Pi tag database. It's up to you. In this case, I'll choose CDT. Go ahead and choose search. And here's the name of our tag. I'll go ahead and add that. Click on OK. And then that's added to this list. Of course, I already had that there. Let me go ahead and delete this. There we go. So now we're only going to be associating a single Pi tag with this Pi gauge. Okay. This supports a single tag. Now most of the other things on here are so obvious that it's just an insult to your intelligence to go over. Update. Well, obviously update, that's how frequently we update on the screen. Some of the other things may not be real obvious. Like for example, why a start time and an end time? This doesn't show a trend or something that requires a start and end time. Well, of the two, the one that you have to be concerned about with the Pi gauge is the end time. The end time is what is the timestamp we're actually going to show. So for example, if I were to choose T for today, that's going to be today at midnight. That's the timestamp we will show. Typically though, we see people choose the default, which is current time. So this will update in real time. Now there are several things on here that we're simply going to ignore because, well, two reasons. First of all, we're going to ignore all these little lightning bolts here and the data sets because, well, that's something that we'll either cover later on or simply not going to cover at all because it's such an advanced topic like these web part connections that we do that in our web parts class. So we may not get to those. Other things we're simply going to skip because they're so obvious. And well, I shouldn't say they're so obvious, but they're very well documented in the documentation that I just pointed you to. And many of them are very obvious. Just to give you an example, take a look at this. There are 3 zones. Well, no surprise. You see 3 colors here. We see red, green, blue. Well, you can figure that out. That's basically how you can control this. Some other things may not be real obvious. You know, for example, if I wanted to, I don't know, change this, make it look more like a gas gauge, empty, full, I can change the angle so that this looks more like a gasoline gauge, you know, full, empty tank, that kind of thing. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail with this. Let's just go ahead and click on OK. What we get as an end result is we have a pi tag that's now associated with this. And if we go into view mode, go ahead and edit out of this or exit out of this edit mode by clicking there. Now we've got our gauge. Now this gauge can be used, as I said, if you just hover over this, you're going to see what the current value is. If you do a right click on this, you can do an ad hoc trend. It's one of the many objects that supports this ad hoc trend. And now I can go in and start making changes to this. Look at different sets of data. Zoom in, do all the nice things that you usually do with a process book trend. Here's one thing that I didn't show you that is not that advanced, but it ends up being very helpful sometimes, and that is, even though each individual gauge can only support one value at a time, obviously that's the purpose of a gauge, you can actually generate many gauges at once. So for example, I can go out and do another tag search, and in this case, let me go out and find, let's use the module database to go out and find a data point that we're interested in. I'm going to drop another gauge, and this time it's going to be let's just get the ping rate from one of our servers. This is our, as you can see, I'm drilling down through all the different hierarchies within my AF database here to find, there we go, that's what I'm interested in. I'm going to look at the ping value of that. There we go. And I can do that for as many tags as I need to. Now, if I choose horizontal or vertical, it's going to either align these gauges horizontally or vertically. In fact, let's go ahead and choose vertical. I'll go ahead and say OK. As you can see, the nice thing here is that we've been able to build 2 things at once. There's our CDT158, and now here's the ping rate that we're getting from our one of our servers.